it to go?
Well, I've said, first of all, just to confirm what you just said, that it would go exclusively and completely to transit and infrastructure. It will be held in a separate fund, and I'm quite happy to receive nominations as to who people would trust to be in charge of it. If they said it's Ryan and Jay, not a problem. Then you'll be the two trustees that will look after it. And I furthermore said, in all seriousness, I've said I'll put independent people in charge of it, and that it will be audited every year by the Auditor General, who will report to the public saying every penny that went in, how much was it, and where did every penny go going out. And the idea will be that it's all exclusively, without exception, to go to transit and to infrastructure.
Why the idea of a set fare? When we talk about the $2.
That was just an example, Ryan. I did. That's not a set. Well, I mean, it could. The report that came out today. The reason I spoke to this is because a city staff report came out today analyzing tolling, and they said you could pick either method. You could pick a distance method like the 407, or you could pick a flat rate method, which is $2, $1, $3, whatever. And so I just used the $2 example and said I kind of favored a flat rate today.
Why?
But I just think it's less complicated. I realize that if you're going one exit on the Gardiner, you might think it's not so good. Right now, we have a flat rate to go on the TTC. You know, you put a token in, and if you're going 2 stops on the TTC or 12 stops, you pay the same token. And so I just thought that the flat rate is simpler. But I have very clearly said today that the staff of the city, the officials, the non-partisan, non-politician officials, will bring their expertise to bear on answering all of these questions, including what should be the best, simplest, least expensive technology to implement this if the City Council approves of it. And I have no ability to set, nor do I'm trying through the $2 example. I was just trying to say, if you had $2 each way and it was flat rate, this is how much money it would raise to pay for transit and alleviate bad traffic.
When you hear the term world-class city, and it's a debate that we have within our city a lot, do you think the nightmarish traffic that we have existing in and around the downtown core, do you think that is what keeps us from being a world-class city?
I think we are a world-class city, but I think it detracts from our ability to look, I'm not so worried about what other people think about Toronto. I'm worried about that. You want tourists and investors to think well of Toronto. I'm worried first and foremost about the people who live here. And I'm worried about the fact, for example, they are presently underwriting the entire cost of 2 very expensive highways, $3 billion plus. It's going to cost over the next years to build and upkeep those highways. They're paying the entire cost, and 40% of the people using it are not paying anything. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the livability of the city because traffic is bad for the environment, bad for families, bad for the economy. And so I want to see that remedied. And I think people elected me to try and fix the traffic. And I'm honest enough to say to them, I can do things to help manage it better in the short term with signal retiming and new technology and changing the way lanes are configured and putting in more left turn signs and all that. But the real solution to the traffic nightmares that so many of your listeners experience are going to come from more transit, so more people have an option to use transit, which they would presently say they don't really. And that has to be built, and it has to be paid for. And that's the part I'm being straightforward about in saying we got to build it, and I'm saying we have to be honest about saying we have to pay for it. People always say somebody else should pay. Folks, there is no somebody else here. It's us.
And I want to just clarify this before we go into the phone calls, because there are a lot of phone calls here at 416-872-1010. When we talk about the Gardiner Expressway and the DVP, if I'm driving along and I change onto the DVP, that will still be just one flat fare in your mind if it was under a flat fare system. There is some concern that you would charge somebody for using each highway individually.
You know, Ryan, I have specifically said today it's not up to me to sort of provide answers right now and kind of almost muse out loud about what I think should be the answer. That's why we're going to ask our officials for this. Certainly my contemplation would be that you would get on once and pay once, and if you chose to go all the way from the 427 to the top of the Parkway, that's one charge. That would be my contemplation. And you charge one flat rate, and then if you come back, it's a second charge. Like in other words, you come all the way back at the end of the day. But I don't think you'd pay twice to go on the 2 highways there. And part of the reason for keeping the 2 interconnected was because we needed to have a ring road around Toronto so people could get around. And so I would see it myself. But again, there's going to be a lot of study of this stuff and a lot of chance for the public to have their views heard, including those who want to say they think the whole thing is a bad idea.
Well, let's start with...
I'm sure there's a few of those out there.
David, you're on with Mayor John Tory. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks for taking my call. I am pleased to say I just left the Eaton Centre 28 minutes ago and just turned on to Front Street. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think, fine, we're gonna implement tolls. That's the decision that's been made. I think trying to talk about what's happened before and what hasn't is beside the point. the real concern that people should have is, what is the city going to do with the money once it has it? And I know, Mayor Tory, you had said, you're going to take and earmark those funds and that they're going to be dedicated. And I guess what would make me feel a whole heck of a lot better is that you would take and commit to creating a dedicated fund like the province did with the Ontario Trillium Trust and create line items for very specific transit.
Okay, I think we understand where you're going.
May I ask David a question before he goes, though, Ryan? Is he gone already?
No, he's there.
David, where are you going in your car? You're going from the Eaton Centre to where? Where's your end-up destination?
I am going west, almost to Mississauga.
Are you going outside of Toronto? Like, are you going out to the Toronto border?
No, I'm not going to go outside Toronto, but given the scheme that has been laid out in very general terms today, I will get nailed with a toll because I do have to take the. Are
you a 905 or a 416? I think is what the mayor's asking you, David.
416.
Okay, and that's fine. But I will say to you, David, that what we are going to do, and we're the exact structure of this fund is not going to be dissimilar to what you're talking about. It'll have money that goes in. It'll be audited rigorously, run independently by people who can be trusted, who are not politicians. And the idea will be line by line. It'll say this much money went to build the waterfront LRT, and this much went to the Scarborough subway. But the idea is going to be to give you more transit options, David, so that you maybe don't have to take 28 minutes to go in your car down to Front Street, and you can get on a train or some other kind of transit vehicle and go home on transit.
Why not upload these highways to the province?
They downloaded them to us, Ryan.
I know, but why not give them back?
How do I upload them? What do I do? Do you have an idea? Shall I just take up
Toronto? I mean, that's a pretty big job.
I wish. Boy, you think I have this power to just go and hand highways over to Premier Wynne? If Premier Wynne and that government, or anybody else, it doesn't matter what party's there, if they wanted to take that highway back and assume the $3 billion that we're going to pay out of Toronto taxpayers' pockets over the next few years to rebuild a highway that is at its life's end, then I'd be delighted to hand it over to
Have you at least had the conversation with her about
but
that?
I mean, there's no point. What they've given, they're not going to take back. And I just think now we've got to establish that if Toronto taxpayers are going to own it and operate it, then that's fine. All who use it should pay their fair share, including lots of people who don't pay any taxes whatsoever, not a penny in the city of Toronto. And I think that's fair.
I'll ask her next time she's here.
Oh, you do that. I'd be delighted.
See what she has to say. Let's play a call for Mayor Tory. I want you to have a listen. This is a caller to the Jerry Agar show.
In the nose?
He might be, actually. It was a long diatribe. We've cut it down just a little bit. I want you to have a listen to what he had to say to you.
How about not going billions of dollars over budget on transit projects that exist already? Or you know what, as you alluded to earlier, how about the nobility of maybe taking a pay cut instead of making us foot the bill for their irresponsible spending? I'm not saying we re-elect the likes of Rob Ford here, but Mayor Tory had my respect up until today, wherein he basically has gone back on everything he's ever talked about on transit.
All right.
It's garbage, it's nonsense, and I'd love to hear him defend himself later, because this is garbage.
Whether that person is correct with the facts, you hear a lot of that on our phone lines, on our text board. How do you respond to that type of criticism?
Well, I'll tell you, the one thing I have not gone back on, and I won't, is that property taxes, the increases over the time I've been mayor, this will now be my third budget, will be kept to the rate of inflation or below. And I think when that is the biggest single check people write to the City of Toronto each and every year, and for a lot of seniors is one of the biggest checks they write to anybody all year, and the same with first-time home buyers, I am happy that I've kept that promise, and I'm happy that I've chosen not to try to increase property taxes 5 or 10% to pay for the transit we need. When the guy says I've gone back on everything I've said about transit, that's absolute rubbish. I said we were going to proceed ahead with the Scarborough subway. We're doing it. I said we were going to proceed ahead with the relief line. We're doing it. We were going to build SmartTrack. We're doing it. SmartTrack is actually under construction in the northeast end of the city. So that person's just not speaking the truth. They're mad. I understand that. And with respect to the pay cut, I mean, the pay cut is one of those things where if you meant a pay cut for the city councillors, I would have no trouble with that. But I mean, good luck getting a majority of votes. I don't have a majority government.
Text message at 71010. Mayor Tory, please stop saying people in the 905 have to pay for the roads they use in Toronto. Don't people in the 416 use their roads, or people from Toronto never going to the suburbs?
No, here's the difference. Is that the Gardiner Expressway and the Don Valley Parkway are multi-billion-dollar expressways that are paid for exclusively by the people of the City of Toronto. There is really no equivalent to that. In other words, when you go on the QEW out through to Mississauga, that's a provincial road. Those roads, as you pointed out earlier, were downloaded to the City of Toronto by the province back in the Mike Harris days, and they are now the exclusive financial responsibility of the City of Toronto. And so there is no equivalent to the fact that 905ers drive on a road that is exclusively paid for by city taxpayers.
Let me bring Matt into the conversation. We'll take some calls at 416-872-1010. Matt, I ask you to keep it brief and direct to the mayor.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I just want to applaud the mayor on this initiative. I think it's a great idea. One thing I'd like to get his comments on is whether he's considered omitting commercial vehicles from this tax and the implications that might have on commerce in the city.
It's a great question. A lot of businesses concerned about this today.
Yeah, the only thing that we actually had talked about, we just haven't discussed exemptions. And again, we haven't got into that level of detail, but one of the things we have discussed is exempting, of course, emergency vehicles. But we haven't discussed exempting commercial vehicles. And they're not exempt, for example, on the 407. In fact, a lot of them pay the extra because they want to have the assurance that they can move along in better traffic. But these are all the kinds of things that are going to be answered over the coming days, and we will hear from business, and we will hear from people like the caller, and get input on this, and that's going to be most welcome. I'm just putting forward a choice I made as to the answer to the question, which I think is one that people are owed an honest answer on, which is how are you going to pay for the transit that we need to alleviate the nightmarish traffic?
You've said no to the alcohol tax, the idea of taxing alcohol sold.
It's impractical, Ryan. I explained this today, but I can give you the brief explanation.
If you could,
the province said that when it came, there's only two places you can apply a tax on alcohol. One is at the LCBO, and the province basically said, I think quite reasonably, they didn't want to have two pricing schemes, one in Toronto and one elsewhere, where they'd have to have different prices on all the bottles and so on. And the other was to apply it at the restaurant or, bar level, where there is no real provision for collecting a tax for the city. The federal government collects all that tax now on behalf of the province, so they'd have to collect it, make some estimate as to how much came from drinks from Torontonian, from Toronto bars, and then send us a check back. So it's very cumbersome, and it really means that revenue measure that we have in the City of Toronto Act isn't worth much to us because it's not practical to implement it.
What about the tax on tobacco?
Well, it's the same thing, you see. There's really no easy way to collect it. And for us to set up an entire collection mechanism, because believe me, I looked at those two first because I think that, especially smoking, most people would say, hey, if you're going to smoke, then you're going to pay the price. And it just wasn't practical to collect it, and it didn't produce very much money, even if you could collect it. Like, it produced a few $1 million, whereas a toll is going to produce more because there are many more people involved. And so that's why we didn't go those two routes.
Let me bring in Adam. Adam, you've got a couple of ideas for Mayor Tory.
The first idea is, would you consider on-peak and off-peak pricing?
I wouldn't rule that out, Adam. I think that's another consideration. I know in some cities they've done that even on transit. I think it's in San Francisco or L.A. I think it's L.A. They've said if you ride the transit before 7 o'clock and away from the really busy time, you'll get a bonus for doing that. I wouldn't rule that out at all, and I'm just saying these are the kinds of details our officials are going to advise us on, but I think it's a very interesting idea.
Now, my second question is, since we already paid for these highways, would you consider having residents of the city pay less than people coming from the 905 and outside the city?
In the report that prompted me to speak today, that is out there for all to read, prepared by the city officials, not by politicians, they specifically put forward that possibility. I just think at the end of the day, I want to get established first the principle that the notion that you can ride for free on these highways when you don't pay any taxes in Toronto is important. After that, I don't have any opinions that I've had a chance to think about, but that's in the report specifically suggested you could do that. And of course you could.
Can I just ask, I want to try to get a handle for people out there on the Gardiner Expressway this afternoon. What is the cost of repairing that highway specifically? Do we know what that cost is?
There's a report that just came out today, and if you ask me if I can remember the exact numbers of the Gardiner separated from the Parkway, but I can tell you the cost of keeping both up over the next 30 years, including the complete rebuilding that basically has to be done for the Gardiner. And this is not because of any movement of it to free up the development of the Portlands. This is because of just the wear and tear where it's basically worn out, especially over to the east. The cost of that and upkeep and future reconstruction of the Don Valley Parkway is $3.165 billion.
And this is a program, if we were talking about road tolls, that may not be implemented for 7 years. We need these repairs immediately, do we not?
Well, and there are a series of projects that are going to start, I think, in 2018 or 19. Okay. So the bottom line is they're in the budget now, and this is part of the point. Those repairs that I just talked about, the $3 billion, they're in the city's budget now. So if we collect tolls and offset those costs out of the budget, then that $3 billion will be available for transit. Either way, we're going to take in extra money that is going to pay for transit, but the repairs to the Gardiner and Parkway must be made to keep those roads safe, and that will be done, and it's going to be done no matter what. It has to be done, and that's the point I'm making about the fact all of that money is presently being footed by City of Toronto taxpayers, and not a penny of it is being contributed by people who drive on the roads, 40% of the drivers who live somewhere